So as mentioned in the previous lecture, there's still more to shapes. We can do this really cool thing, which we briefly went over in the menu, which is called path down here in the object. So if you click on the object in our menu and go down to path, you can actually go ahead and add, subtract, intersect, exclude overlap, convert path, and outline stroke, which right now you probably have no idea what any of those do, which is totally fine. That's the whole point of this lecture, is that we're going to go through these. So we're going to go over each of them briefly so you have an idea of what they do. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and just bring my shapes together right here, so that they're kind of overlapping on here. This is just for the purpose of this lesson so you can learn what those Boolean tools do. So if I just drag and click both of these shapes, and now I can see they're both selected because they're both highlighted in my layers panel, and right here I can see they both have this outline over them, which means they're both selected. Another way you can select objects is by going to the layers panel, clicking on one object, and then while holding shift you can click on another object, and now both are also selected. So either or works. So go ahead and select both of your square and oval shape over here, and then go down to object, path, and do add, which you can also do by holding Alt Command U. Cool. So now what XD has done is it's created a union shape based off of those two shapes that I have. So what that means is that it's gone ahead and joined those two shapes to create this one shape that I can now use as I'd like. Now those shapes are still contained within that union group, so if I double click into the shape itself, I can still access my ellipse and rectangle layer over here, and I can still move them around. So if I move it around and put it over here in the corner and then exit out by either clicking away or pressing escape, you can see the shape is now changed, and it's still one shape, although I can still access those individual layers, which is super cool. This allows us to create unique shapes that need to be created out of a combination of multiple shapes or multiple ellipses, squares, triangles, and so on. Cool. Now I'm going to Command Z to undo that a bunch of times, and now we have our shapes back as two different layers as it was before. Now if we do the other path, which is called subtract, it will do the exact opposite. It will go ahead and actually subtract and remove any shared part between those shapes. So because the circle and the square had this little half circle area as the shared space between them, it's gone ahead and removed that from the combined shapes, or I guess subtracted shapes. Same thing with the subtraction. You can always go in there and edit your shape to create different types of subtractions. Now, of course, if I take this circle completely out of the square, there won't be any subtraction because there are no places where these two shapes kind of combine. So for Boolean options to work, your shapes have to be overlapping. Otherwise, there is nothing to add or subtract. So I'm going to undo that a bunch of times, go back to my shapes, and then we're going to try the intersect. So what intersect does is it will go ahead and find the shared region between those two shapes. So if I just go back, as you can see, this little area is what both shapes overlap. So it will go ahead and I'm just going to hit Command Shift Z here to redo that. So as you can see, it will go ahead and combine those two and find the area where those shapes intersect and create a unique shape like this one, which I can always, of course, tweak. Let's undo that and go back to Object, and now explore Exclude Overlap, which will do the opposite of intersect. It will go ahead and find the area that's shared and remove that from the new shape. Finally, convert to path will go ahead and actually convert these two shapes to a path, which is what we had with this kind of, I guess, diamond looking shape over here. So now if I double click into my circle, I can edit each node, and I can make really unique shapes from my pre-existing shape that I had access to before. Remember that in order to access those nodes, you need to double click into your shape and then going ahead and tweaking that shape. If you're not inside of the path, nothing will change, so you got to make sure you're inside of the path itself. And the way you do that is that once you are inside the path, you can actually edit each node. Let's Command Z a bunch of times and go back to our shapes. Now I'm going to Command Z until I see my ellipse and rectangle instead of the paths. Finally, last but not least, is object, path, and outline stroke. Or you can achieve this by pressing Shift, Command O. And what this will do is, right now we have the borders and the shapes, or if I actually go back, as you can see in the layers panel, we have an ellipse, we have this square, and it's intact with its border. By pressing, I meant to say Alt Command O instead of Shift. So if you press Alt Command O, now you see I've created an outline stroke. So what that's doing is it's separating my border from the shape. So now the ellipse is a separate shape, and the border here is the stroke, or the border here is a separate shape as well, or a separate layer, I should say. So now I can kind of move these around and they will be separate from each other. They're not really related anymore. And if I delete one, you see the outline stroke is still there. And if I delete the stroke here, the shape is still, or I guess the ellipse here without its stroke is here. So if at any point you want to separate the border from the shape, you can do that by going to Object, Path, and Outline Stroke once you have your shape selected. Again, I'm going to do Command Z a bunch of times to go back to having my shapes as they were, and then just going to go ahead and separate that out of that. So as a little exercise before we move on from Boolean groups, I want you to go ahead and create a shape similar to this one. I guess it's kind of a dumbbell looking shape. And of course, use your path options under the object to achieve that by combining multiple shapes to achieve this similar design. One little neat thing that I want to tell you is if you want to duplicate shapes, you can always hit Command D and then it'll go ahead and create another shape, another copy of that shape for you. That's a little tip if you're trying to duplicate this little oval and place it here. So yeah, I'll leave that as a little exercise for you, and then we'll do it together in the next lecture.